Okay, welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. A lot, a lot on the agenda, as always. I think Biden and Camilla is the gift that keeps on giving for podcasters like us. And we have an unfortunate incident, to say the least, with Russia. I'd like your comments. Let's have this an open slate with Dr. Lopkin. Some of your thoughts in terms of why this happened and its repercussions.
There's a lot of reasons why it happened, not the least of which is the fact that Putin is now 70. He long ago stated his desire to reunite the Soviet Union, and now realistically his time is running out. You know, we don't know how much longer he's going to be able to hold on to power. So he wants to make a big splash with this. He wants to push the Soviet Union back together. And of course, Biden's foreign policy weakness just gave him the golden opportunity to do so.
It was a clean slate. There's there's going to be some bumps in the road for him, but it's pretty much, thank you very much, done.
For the most part, yes. And, during the 2020 campaign, Biden was yelling, "Oh, Putin doesn't want me to be president because he'll stand up to Putin." It's like, no, Putin didn't do anything under the Trump administration. Under the Obama administration, with Biden as vice president, he invaded Crimea. So he knew that Biden was weak. And let's be very clear about this. The entire world knew that Biden was weak on foreign policy. We had Al Qaeda members at Guantanamo who, during interrogation, admitted that they were considering assassinating Barack Obama just because they knew Biden couldn't handle the job.
That's, but you'll never hear that on MSNBC or CNN. But what you will hear, Dr. Lopkin and our listeners out there, is you'd have to be on some really good pot to come to grips with this one. MSNBC and CNN talking heads were blaming Trump. Really?
Well, because that's their agenda and they're sticking to it. Here's some facts. Russia's entire economy is based on oil and gas. They've actually been referred to as a gas station with an army. Under Trump, not only did America have energy independence, so we had no need for their oil and gas, we were supplying Europe. So they had less need for Russia's oil and gas. Biden comes in, kills America's energy independence, gives the go-ahead for the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, gets Europe more dependent on Russian oil and gas.
Plus some simple supply and demand. With
Yes,
us out of the picture being net importers now, his leverage went down the crapper, and he's so beholden to the Bernie Sanders AOC wing of his nutcase party that he's incapable of ramping up production or sending a signal through the world oil markets that he's prepared to do that. He's really a capon in chief.
That's the big problem. This entire thing that's going on with Ukraine could be handled very simply and without Americans putting any troops on the ground. And number one is you reverse every energy policy that Biden made when he came in.
Still doable, by the way.
Yeah. Yes. You ramp up production because, one, it makes us less reliant on Russia. It makes Europe less reliant on Russia. But it also lowers the price of oil, which means
supply and demand.
Right. So it means Russia will be making less money. So that's one. Two, massive.
But can I interject one thing? Just interject one thing real quick. Is when you've been in, I'll use the term public service, on the dole, like Biden has, you don't understand supply and demand. Is that so far off from the truth?
No, it's not. Unfortunately, most politicians don't understand how economics work. But so, yeah, that's the first phase. Phase two, massive economic sanctions. Strangle their ability to access international banks. Go after the oligarchs that are supporting Putin. You crush their monetary supply and crush their oil and gas, they're not going to have enough money to pay their troops. Guess what? Russian troops are not invading Ukraine to protect the motherland and out of patriotism. No, these are soldiers who are being paid. You stop paying them, they will stop fighting. And phase three is start hiring hackers and build up our offensive capabilities in cyber warfare.
Everything you said is 100% correct. And what infuriates me and perplexes me is that we have someone who's well beyond, he never had an A game to begin with. Now he's got a Z minus game, not B minus, Z minus. His ability to think strategically and the doofuses he has surrounding him, that what you just outlined 100% makes strategic sense. Will it happen, Dr. Lopkin?
Probably not.
0 being 0 and 10 being a definite. What would you give it? I'd give it a 1.
I'd give it a 1. Yes. I don't think they'll go down that road. I mean, let's not forget. Robert Gates said, Biden's been on the wrong side of every foreign policy decision for 50 years. And of course, my favorite Biden quote from Barack Obama himself, never underestimate Biden's ability to F things up.
There's no question about it. Speaking of effing things up, we have Camilla, the esteemed vice president, on her tour, her reboot tour, if you want to call it that. And she basically had a very, 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 very big debacle once again, didn't she, Dr. Lopkin?
She does, I don't even know what to say about her anymore. She can't open her mouth without screwing things up. She was never prepared to be vice president. She was certainly never prepared to be president. Putting her
but
out.
If you listen to her speech, it was like the 1980s Valley Girl. It was like, guys, it was like a rambling, whatever, mishmash of nonsense. And even Kelsey Gabbard, who once a Democrat, I think she's leaving the reservation.
I actually believe she is going to switch parties because I know she is speaking at CPAP.
Exactly. Yes, that was my next point. But she called it a embarrassment, and I think she's 100% correct. And I'm also thinking, I'd love your insight on this one. I'm not so sure she's not the canary in the coal mine. Since the Democratic Party is now synonymous with insanity, if maybe 2 or 3 others are going to hit the road. Manchin, others, you never know.
It's very possible. We do have at last count, there were 30 Democratic Congresspeople who were not running for re-election. Some of them are seeking other offices. Some of them are just heading for the hills.
Actually, there's an article that came out that forget about it. Let's say everything was neutral in the election. Just their resignations are enough to give the Republicans the House. With nothing else done.
They're leaving in droves because the Democratic Party put all of its marbles in the hands of the woke radical squad. And now people are realizing America's not going to put up with it. In the 2021 elections, the country overwhelmingly voted against the liberal agenda. We spoke about this just last week or the week before. San Francisco recalled the woke school board members for being too liberal. If you're too liberal for San Francisco, you don't have a prayer in the rest of the country.
And there's a lot more to be said for that San Francisco recall. Just like the election in Virginia, it's got repercussions. I mean, like you said, this never happens. I think, is there as Reagan said, a morning in America? I mean, is there a sea change? I really believe what happened is people were sick of Trump, rightfully so. The tweeting about the Denny's waitress, who knows what he was doing, just wanted normalcy. And what they got is socialism, and they're not digging it.
Yeah, the problem is when they looked at Trump, they looked at his personality. They didn't pay attention to any of his policies. And let's face it, MSNBC, CNN, they never talked about any of his policy successes. They just hammered home Orange Man bad. But you weren't electing somebody to come over for dinner and to be your best friend. You were supposed to elect somebody capable of leading the country. And Biden clearly is not that person. And part of the blame lies with the media for covering up the Hunter Biden laptop, for covering for all of Biden's flaws. But even more than that, I blame the powers that be at the Democratic Party, because if they hadn't kowtowed to the left, they might have had realistic, good candidates to run. The only one capable of running the country that actually had a shot at winning the election on the Democratic side was Tulsi Gabbard. And they threw her to the wolves. Hillary came out saying, oh, she's a Russian operative. It was absolutely ridiculous. And
I think even the
Minnesota.
I agree, but and I didn't love her, but even the senator from Minnesota, Klobuchar, she would have done it. I mean, at least she would.
Yes, Amy Klobuchar would have been much better than Biden or certainly any of the left-wing wackos.
Freak shows. But it's really interesting. You talk about Biden's so far failed administration, even early on, where usually there's a natural inclination to rally around the president. George W. Bush had like an 80% approval rating after 9/11. Biden, just the opposite. He's underwater and significantly underwater with Ukraine and Russia. And I don't think it's going to get any better, especially when gas gets to $6 or $7 a gallon.
No, that's certainly not going to make anything better. And his speech the other day talking about how the Ukraine situation is going to push gas prices up. Gas prices are going up because of his policies. This is just a convenient scapegoat. Will they affect gas prices? Absolutely. Do they have to affect gas prices? No, because if he reversed all of his decisions, prices would go down and what rose from Ukraine would be negligible.
But do you think he actually has the capability, which you already just talked about? I don't think he has the capability to, first of all, I don't think he's in charge, and I don't think he has the capability to adjust on the fly. I'm thinking about Bill Clinton. He was in Shitsville in terms of his first 2 years in office. He reversed himself and became extremely popular.
Right. But remember, Clinton was a centrist. So he had the ability to flip like that. Biden is right now beholden to the left wing of his party. And again, this is a failing of the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party back in the 70s, after the disastrous candidates they had put in that were all very left-wing candidates, the Democrats put in the superdelegates so that if liberals pushed forward these horrible candidates, the superdelegates could smack them down and go, no, that candidate's never going to win a national election. We can't put them up. They put this safety valve in place, and yet every candidate that is up and is the reason that these are in place, they refuse to pull the plug.
I would agree with that. It's an interesting scenario. We'll see how this plays out. Speaking of the media, though, is they had Ted Turner he's working on a biography, and the biographer was talking about some of his correspondence and interaction with Mr. Turner, and he literally said he was near suicide in terms of observing what's happened to his baby, his brainchild, CNN, under Zucker. Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, Zucker wasn't good for CNN. He wasn't good for anybody. He's gone. Let's see what CNN can become. I think the next person they have to get rid of is Brian Stelter. But
I
we'll
think he's
see
on the
what.
way out.
Wouldn't surprise me. There's been a lot of talk that he's the next to go.
Yes, no question. But we also talked about before the show in terms of looking at the Olympics. We talked about that last show, I should say, and it's just official now. The lowest rating ever, not last year. I'm talking ever, and not surprisingly so. So the genocide Olympics, abject failure.
Yeah, people stood up against the Olympics because it was ridiculous. It should never have been given to China. And actually, speaking of China, I just received a news alert. The Department of Justice has announced that it is ending its China Initiative program. This program was aimed at preventing spying by the Chinese Communist Party. And they are canceling this program because of accusations of bias. Seriously? We are putting, let's make China feel good and let's not make them feel that we're picking on them in front of our own national security.
Well, wokeism comes into everything. You look at General Miley Cyrus, he's a perfect example of that. A couple other things on the agenda: the trucker convoy that we saw play out with Justin Trudeau, the maitre d', turned into fascist. That will be coming to America and may end up in Washington, D.C., March 6th, right at the perfect time of Joey's State of the Union.
Now, let's clarify that. The trucker convoy that's coming to D.C. for the State of the Union is not the same convoy that's in Canada. This is a convoy.
No. I'm saying it's no. You misunderstood me. Yeah. No, Canada is Canada. This is starting in California and going to end up in Washington.
Right.
No, totally separate.
Yes.
Might have been inspired by them. Yes.
Yeah, they're going to converge on D.C. just in time for the State of the Union. The Capitol Police announced that they don't have enough tow trucks to get rid of these truckers once they arrive. So they're putting up barriers over streets. They're blocking off things ahead of time because they're terrified of hearing Americans voice their opinion.
Yes, that's where we've come to. I think it's not going to be a great State of the Union. I remember Jerry Ford is almost comical, almost like a Saturday Night Live skit, which they did a lot on with him, when he said the State of the Union is not good. So I wonder what Joey will have to say. But speaking of the State of the Union, you have basically the new phenomena that hasn't been experienced by Americans in over 40 years, and that's stagflation. And stagflation is the phenomenon of low growth and high inflation. Usually it's high growth and inflation, but this is a double whammy that really affects people on the marginal economy. Your thoughts? And to that, by the way, consumer confidence is the lowest in, I believe, 5 months.
Yeah, consumer confidence is dropping. Inflation keeps rising. Biden's numbers on the economy are underwater because he keeps hammering away. Well, wages are going up. When inflation averages 2 to 3% above wage growth, you're not making more money. So
that's kind of higher level math, though, for Joey. I mean, he's still working on 10 goes into 100, carry the one, whatever. Yeah, I think that's pretty high level stuff for him.
Well, I mean, we've obviously seen that Biden hasn't gotten past C-spot run, so we can't expect him to understand these higher concepts. But yeah, people.
Do you think he understands the concept of the debt is now over $30 trillion, and his prescription for lowering inflation is more spending? Doesn't that about summarize his thought process, mental ability, and lack thereof?
Well, honestly, I don't think there's anybody left in the government in either party
Wouldn't argue.
that cares about the debt anymore, which is ridiculous because so much of this debt is owned by China that it's actually a security risk. But I don't think anybody in Washington cares. They just want to spend. And this is
Yeah, they
both
want.
parties.
I'll agree, and let's just close out on this. I have a feeling that given it's a once in a lifetime opportunity with Biden and Camilla and the rest of these woke moron generals and military people in power, I believe within the next year, China will attempt to secure Taiwan. Not only can they do that militarily, but we have very few options on the table. We can do this, that, and the other. If they say, okay, you want to get tough, we're going to call in our debt. Check, please.
Yeah, that's always a possibility. And right now, that is a massive national security issue. And also, tying it into everything else that's going on, it's also the reason why we need to defend Ukraine. Now, I don't want to see troops on the ground in Ukraine. I don't want us sending, the military over. We can give them air cover. We can send them as many weapons and support them as much as possible without our troops. But the fact of the matter is, if we let Russia just walk into Ukraine and do nothing, China sees this. They're watching. They go, okay, this means they're not going to prevent us into going into Taiwan. Iran is watching. It tells Iran, oh, they're not going to stop us taking over our neighbors and increasing our funding of terrorism.
North and Korea nuclear proliferation,
watching. Yes.
Everyone's watching, and it's a domino effect. I hate to bring something up from the 60s that at that time was inaccurate. This is not inaccurate. This time, the domino effect applies. Final thoughts, Dr. Lopkin.
Yeah, we are in a ridiculous situation. And the fact of the matter is, it is completely self-inflicted. If we had, even electing Biden, if he had just left Trump's policies in place, this would not have been happening. I don't remember who it was, but somebody early on pointed out all Biden had to do to be a success
was go back in the basement.
Was do nothing and just leave everything operating on autopilot.
And that's the only thing we can assume. But that goes with the assumption that he wasn't beholden to the left, and that's his epitaph. That was his undoing. He could have just shut up, let it all happen, and get some chocolate chip ice cream. That would have been it. Well, another edition of Carnivore Bites is done. Great show, and we're accessible almost everywhere, aren't we?
Absolutely. If you want us to look into an issue specifically, or you have a comment or question, you can get a hold of us at xvadio.com/connect. And to hear every episode of this podcast, as well as the rest of the Xvadio Podcast Network, you can go to xvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcast app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and wherever you find podcasts.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin.
We'll see you next time.